Hello, U.S. history students. Mr. Lugiai here. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about the Western Front in World War II. Um, Now, I will say, for most historians and teachers of history, World War II is one of our most interesting topics. We kind of all love to talk about it. So, kind of talking about this in 45 minutes or less is very difficult. So, what we have done is this is the base level of information you need to know about the European theater of war, the Western Front. That's going to be the Nazis and the British and the Americans and the Soviets and the Italians all fighting each other in World War II. We're going to also link in your notes several different videos, applications, documents, pictures for you to look through. Those are all optional for students that really like to talk about World War II or want to learn more, but can't teach outside of 45 minutes class period. Feel free to peruse those. And there's so many amazing movies about World War II. I'm sure that a lot of you know Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers on YouTube. Lots of things out there for you to do. So let's get started. We're going to go from the 1930s to the end of 1945 today. And just like in World War One, I put together this map of what Europe looks like prior to the official outbreak of World War II. And we see, just like we talked about in World War One, Germany is in the middle of Europe right here. And they are going to be, for most of their history, surrounded on both sides by France and the Soviet Union by enemies. And Germany is going to have to deal with this problem, both in World War One and World War II, on how can we fight a two-front war. In combat, you never ever want to split your forces. So how are we going to do that? Well, Germany, just like in World War One with the Schlieffen Plan, try to knock France out really quick and focus on Russia. They're going to develop a strategy so that they only have to fight against one enemy at once. So by the 1930s, prior to spring break, we talked about the rise of dictators, particularly with Hitler. Hitler, by the mid 1930s, has full control of all aspects of the German government and military. By the end of the 1930s, he is supreme chancellor. In Germany, he has abolished the office of the president. He is the end all be all of German politics, government, and the military. And very early on, he has decided to stop following the orders of the Treaty of Versailles, and he's going to build Germany's power, military power primarily. It was one of the big aspects of the Treaty of Versailles is to stop German military buildup. But Hitler wants Germany to expand. That's one of the things he promised: elect me chancellor, and I will reclaim German glory. And in order to do that, he said we need to not only reconquer lands lost in World War One, primarily to France, but also those Eastern European nations that are going to form out of the fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But he's also going to try and reestablish Germany's leadership role in Europe. Hitler's goal in World War II is much different than the Kaiser's goal in World War One. Whereas in World War One, this was all about Germany just trying to maintain a leadership status in Europe. The Kaiser did not want the German flag to fly all over Europe. He wanted Germany to be number one in control, but he didn't want to govern France. He didn't want to govern Italy or the United Kingdom or Russia. He just wanted them to know who's top dog. In World War II, Hitler wants all the other European governments that are against him to go away. He wants to be the only ruler in Europe. The Nazi flag will fly from coast to coast. So, in order to do that, you have to have a little different goals. So, Hitler's goal is to create an entire German Europe. So, he has to conquer all of these nations in Europe. And, even his allies eventually will fall under Hitler and the German government. But Germany has this problem, surrounded on both fronts by enemies. So what is he going to do? Well, in 1939, he decides that in order to lay out his plans, he needs to sign an agreement with one of his two enemies, either France or the Soviet Union. Germany and France hated each other. This is a centuries old feud between these two nations. There's no way they're going to go to the bargaining table and say we're good. So in 1939, Germany contacts Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. He signed something called a non aggression pact. Now, this does not make these two allies. Hitler, Stalin, did not like each other. They did not trust each other. They respected each other, as fellow dictators often do, but they are not friends. And what a non aggression pact says is we are going to agree not to invade each other. This is Hitler basically saying, I have a plan to conquer most of Europe. I cannot do that if I have to worry about my Eastern Front in the Soviet Union. So I will attack all these other countries and I will leave you alone. And Stalin in the 1930s, still consolidating power. Soviet Union's going through a lot of changes at this time, jumps at the opportunity because him and Hitler agree to basically split up a lot of the Eastern European nations, primarily Poland. So Stalin and the Soviet Union get something out of this non aggression pact. They get more land and the promise for Hitler to leave them alone. And obviously, Germany and Hitler gets this ability to now fully micro focus all of their aggression on Western Europe, primarily France. So this really opens up Germany to beginning to invade Europe. And this is a political cartoon for the time. We see Hitler right here with his mustache and Stalin with his mustache. Dictators and mustaches. And it says, I wonder how long the honeymoon will last. People know both of these leaders are just interested in power, just interested in expanding what they have. So, yes, this is a union made temporarily, but as we will see, Hitler is going to break this non aggression pact when he believes it suits him. So now that Germany does not have to worry about Eastern Europe, they can kind of begin to focus on growing. In early 1938, Germany is going to be in, we call it annexing. That means taken over nearby nations for their own protection. This is a lie. If you were to poll a majority, primarily Austria, they do not want to be part of Germany. But there is a German population, primarily in the Rhineland, where German speaking, German customs, but Austria has their own society. They're different than Germany, but Hitler was born in Austria, and you can't call yourself the supreme leader of the German people if you're born outside of the country. So very quickly, in the year 1938, Hitler is going to begin to expand his empire, taking over semi-friendly nations. And the rest of Europe, primarily the United Kingdom, allows him to do this. It's kind of like, we'll let you take the Rhineland, but that's it. We'll let you take the Sudetenland, but that's it. We'll let you take Austria, but you got to stop. When World War II officially begins, is when Hitler decides to invade Poland. This is a completely sovereign nation, one that does not have a high German speaking population, does not consider themselves German in any stretch of the imagination like the other nations. And when Hitler decides to invade Poland on September 1st, 1939, that's when we in history say that World War II officially begins. Polish resistance is heavy, but there's just way too much military might that Germany has. Technologically speaking, great military minds in Germany, and they have one focus: conquer Poland to begin with. So eventually, Poland will fall, and because of this, France and England both declare war. Not the Soviet Union like in World War I or Russia at the time of World War I, because they have that non-aggression pact. So we see France and England are two nations that are in Western Europe. So obviously, Hitler is going to focus in on Western Europe. Shortly after France and England declare war on Germany, once Poland is conquered, Hitler is going to turn his entire attention and his entire army to the west. And Hitler is going to use a tactic in World War II. We call this the Blitzkrieg tactic. That just means lightning war. Incredibly fast movement. In combat, oftentimes the person that can move their military over large distances the fastest has huge technical advances. And Hitler learns very quickly that if he can surprise his enemy, if he can break through their forces really quickly, surround them, kill them all, he has a tremendous, tremendous advantage. So Hitler's army is going to be marked by speed. The German army is going to be marked by speed. And just in the span of a few weeks, Hitler controls Norway, Denmark, and most importantly, the northern part of France. And we see here Hitler and his top military commanders standing in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. Germany and France, as we've been saying most of this class, enemies, do not like each other up to this point, and this is the cultural city in all of Europe. Paris being taken over by Hitler. Hitler goes there and he now is in control of Western Europe. So we can see in a very short period of time, the war starts September 1, 1939. By the end of 1940, this is what the map of Europe looks like. We have the Nazi flag flies from the Atlantic Ocean all the way into Russia and the areas that are going to be conquered shortly after the non-aggression pact is signed. Italy is an ally of Germany. Hitler is going to help out Mussolini there. The only major power that really stands in Hitler's way is the United Kingdom and the island of England right here. We have Sweden, Finland. These are going to be neutral countries in World War II, but make no mistake, they do have Nazi operatives working in them. They do have Allied operatives working in them. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like and what that means at a later class. So the United Kingdom stands alone against Hitler. Winston Churchill is elected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in 1940, and he is a wartime Prime Minister, a wartime leader, as we talked about before the break. And by the end of 1941, Hitler has full control of mainland Europe. The last holdout, they said, the last holdout of democracy in Europe is going to be the United Kingdom. Now, Germany cannot invade. The United Kingdom is an island nation. They have the largest navy in the world, very powerful. It makes it impossible for Hitler just to put his forces and use this blitzkrieg tactic on land against the United Kingdom. So what does Germany have to do? Well, they have to bomb the United Kingdom into submission. Hitler sends quite a bit of telegrams and quite a bit of kind of support to the United Kingdom and says, wouldn't it be easier if we were friends? Hitler has a lot of respect for the history of the United Kingdom, for the King of England as well. He hopes that they can be partners like the Soviet Union, but the United Kingdom will never bow their knee to another nation. So they say, absolutely not. Winston Churchill gives his famous, we will fight you on the beaches. We will fight you in the land, in the mountains, on the hills. We will never surrender. And he galvanizes the nation behind this idea that Hitler can bomb us. He can try and invade us. He can unleash his entire armies on this little island, but we will never surrender. Even if that means we have to leave and go to our territories in Canada and fight the war there, the United Kingdom will never suffer. So we call this time the Blitz, the air raids between Germany and the United Kingdom. Every day you would see airplanes above London and Winchester and all of these historic places in the United Kingdom, and they would be fighting a huge air war combat with bombs falling, British bombers attacking German planes, and vice versa for several months. And Hitler just bombs England day after day after day, trying to get them to surrender, but they do not. They hold strong. And eventually, Hitler's going to start losing a lot of airplanes, his Luftwaffe, during this bombing run. And it no longer becomes profitable to continue this war. And he kind of says, we will let this island nation live their life in England. They are of no consequence to me. I control mainland Europe. But he needs to continue expanding. And if Hitler can't expand into the United Kingdom, well, he can expand east. He now controls mainland Europe. What does he not control at this time? The Soviet Union. So Hitler's need to expand, it's this, just part of his nature. I need to keep moving and growing bigger. Hitler turns his attention from the island nation of the United Kingdom. This would make a lot more sense if you could see me, because I'm just stating wildly the geography of Europe. And he turns his attention to the Soviet Union east. There's that non-aggression pact. Soviet Union, Stalin knows eventually Hitler's going to break it. Hitler knows he's going to break it. And eventually in June 1941, it officially happens. So with over 4 million soldiers, Hitler begins to invade east. And very quickly, Hitler is successful, but Stalin, not expecting June 1941 invasion, does eventually halt the German advance. And the fighting in the east, on the Eastern Front, as we call it, is some of the most intense fighting of the war. Probably going to say that a lot because fighting in World War II, very intense. This is very visceral fightings we have. Both sides trading blows. Hitler almost conquers Moscow, as we'll see on the next slide, almost the capital of the Soviet Union, and he's slowly beginning to gain ground. but Stalin is wearing the Germans out. Every mile that is gained by Germany comes at heavy losses. This is kind of giving us World War I vibes, where even just a few feet means that thousands of soldiers are going to die. This is not profitable. So we see here, it's kind of a hard to read map, but Germany is going to advance from the east into the USSR, the Soviet Union at this time. I like this next map better. We have the capital of the Soviet Union, Moscow, and we see the German lines get within 30 miles of the Russian capital. And so almost able to knock out Stalin and his government. But there is a huge push. Stalin orders his men, Moscow will not fall. And just like in World War One, Stalin kind of uses this tactic. I have millions more soldiers and citizens than you do. I will just keep throwing people at you until you run out of bullets. And guess what? When you run out of bullets, I'll still have people to send at you. So the casualty rates in the Soviet Union are astronomical, but they do wear the Germans down. They stop that advance. And eventually, this becomes the main battle lines from 1941, 42, 43, 44, constant combat going back and forth. We're going to talk about what happens in 1944, but eventually the Soviet Union is able to break the backs of the German army and begin to invade Germany. The war in 1941 not going very well for our allied powers. We ended before spring break with the attack of Pearl Harbor, so we know that the United States enters the war on the side of the allies. And really the main three allies left in Europe are going to be the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States is going to begin to send aid to not the Soviet Union, but to the United Kingdom. And in order for the allies to win, here's the strategy. We can't just say, like, we're going to hold out and live in a world where Hitler controls all of Europe. That is not an option. These two sides are now so opposed to each other that neither of them can live in the world with the other. So either the Allies are going to win or the Axis power are going to win. But they cannot exist in the world together. So in order for the Allies to win, here's the strategy. We need to invade Germany. We need to conquer the German capital city of Berlin, and we need to kill or capture Hitler. The terms for Allied victory are nothing short of something called unconditional surrender. Sometimes, when in war, a side surrenders, they say, we'll surrender, but you can't invade our country, and our leader will still be leader. Think of World War One, the Treaty of Versailles. Yes, both sides gave up a little bit, but they weren't able to completely eviscerate the other government. But in World War II, nothing short of complete German surrender. They will have no conditions attached to their surrender will occur. So here is the strategy that the Allies begin to adapt because they're getting their butts kicked in 1941, 1942, and even parts of 1943. The Allies are going to decide to do I call it a three-pronged attack. We have Germany in the middle of Europe. So how do you get to it? Well, we're going to push in from the three sides that are visible. So first, we're going to invade France. We're going to have that invasion from England, and we're going to push east into Germany. We're then going to invade Italy from Africa, and we're going to push north. And then finally, we're going to invade Eastern Europe from the Soviet Union and push west into Germany. As we see here, once this goes out, the objective is to split the German forces. They now have to fight three fronts of war. We're going to make them run out of supplies, and eventually we're going to overpower them on all three fronts, crush them into Germany, invade Berlin, capture, preferably kill Adolf Hitler. So we see here visually what we're talking about. This is the German might, 1941, and we're going to begin to invade from Great Britain. They're going to invade. We're going to talk about that on the next slide in Normandy and push west to east. We're going to invade Africa and invade Italy and push south to north. And then finally, we're going to invade on the Eastern Front, Soviet Union, and push east to west. The goal, capture Germany from all three sides. Hitler has a very large navy that is protecting the North Sea, so we're not going to see too much action on the northern front. But we will see some. If you're interested in Operation Market Garden, you can certainly learn more a little bit about that. So here is the big day, June 6, 1944. We're going to begin the first major prong of that three-pronged attack, the D-Day. That's the invasion of France. This is in popular culture what a lot of people know about World War II. So on June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious assault in history occurred when the Allied powers are going to invade Normandy, France. Saving Private Ryan, very famous opening. I have some pictures on the next slide for you. After intense fighting, the Allied nations eventually win. And we're unsure how this day is going to go. If the Allies lose D-Day, the war becomes increasingly more difficult to fight for the Allies. Some historians say the Allies would have lost completely. I do not fall into that camp, but I think World War II is extended, and who knows what happens if the war is extended? Who knows who gets better technology faster? We can't live in that alternate reality, but we do know that this is a important day. This is where we kind of roll the die on how soon Germany is going to lose. So after intense fighting the Allied nations eventually win, and they're able to establish a foothold on the European mainland. This is important because now we can begin to pour resources into France. We call this the turning point of the war. Within 2 months, all of France is reconquered. The German forces are kicked out of France. There will still be some embedded German forces that are going to fight, but primarily the Allied nations now have a huge foothold and France to begin pushing back against Germany. And the same thing is going to happen in both Africa and the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, we have a 45-minute time limit here. I cannot go into the African campaign with Rommel, the Desert Fox, fighting wonderfully interesting tank battles, or the battles of Stalingrad and Leningrad, pushing against the German forces there. But these are just three pictures we have from the Battle of D-Day, D-Day itself, Battle of Normandy. And we have the amphibious assault. So you'd go from the United Kingdom. Soldiers were put into these carrier boats before shore. They had to run on, heavily defended by the Germans. And this is Dwight Eisenhower, who's going to become president. We're going to talk about him in a few weeks addressing his troops. And I put his full speech because for some of you who have grandparents, great grandparents that fought in Europe. If they were a part of D-Day, they would have received this. Every soldier on that day was given this. And I just think it's one of those moments in history that if you have something like this, it connects you to the past in a way that not many things can. So on the day of the invasion, remember, we are putting all of our allied eggs into this basket to try to invade Normandy to take the fight to Germany. He says, soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you're about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the German great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offense has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessings of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Dwight D. Eisenhower. So, D-Day in our collective history is this moment of great transformation where good triumphs over evil. And there are so many stories embedded in the invasion of Europe from the Allied perspective and the German perspective. I really, really recommend you go out and research and read and watch. Once again, there'll be links in our notes on just ways that you can kind of immerse yourself a little bit more. So, with the successful invasion of France by the Allied powers, uh, Germany is really in disarray. The three pronged approach plan is working very well. The Allied powers have taken over Africa and begun to invade Italy. And France and the Soviet Unions have pushed back the Germans out of their borders, and Germany's quickly losing ground across Europe. So Hitler still, though, has an incredibly powerful military, a devotional military who will do what he says. And he decides to kind of this one last ditch effort for victory. And we call this in history the Battle of the Bulge. So in December 1944, Germany is going to put a majority of its forces and try to break through the Western Front. If Germany is successful, the Allies will be pushed back. Now, once again, some historians will say if the Battle of the Bulge is successful, who knows what happens in World War II? I think by this point, Hitler would just be prolonging the inevitable. But once again, you never know who invents something, who kind of detects something, what is able to happen in history. But what we do know is that Hitler, as we can see here, this is going to be Northern Europe. We have Belgium here. France is going to be a little off the screen. This deep red line is where the German army was before the Battle of the Bulge, and we call it the Battle of the Bulge because look, Hitler tries to push through the Allied lines. He takes a large amount of forces using this blitzkrieg tactic, pushes through the line right here, and creates this pocket. And he is going to use this to break. Once again, you can't see my hand pointing to things on the screen, but he's going to use this to try to circle around and break the Allies' hold on Western Europe. And if he does that, maybe it then becomes a one front war against the Soviet Union, or he's able to swing down and invade Italy. We see here the screen. This is called Bastogne. If you're interested, Band of Brothers and the 101st Airborne hold on to this city throughout the Battle of the Bulge. It is an incredibly interesting story. But this is Hitler's last ditch effort. He tries to very quickly break through using his military and his steel and defeat the Allies on the Western Front. After heavy fighting, once again, intense fighting in World War II, the Allies, primarily on the Western Front, we're talking the US and the UK, are able to push back the German forces. And with the defeat of the Germans at the Battle of the Bulge, now it's just a ticking time bomb on how long Hitler has left to hold on to power. All three fronts, west, east, south, pushing in on Germany. The German force is now primarily made up of those radical followers of Hitler, and the elderly and the children that were not able to fight in main combat are left to try to defend Germany and then defend Berlin. It's only a matter of time. A lot of old people, children, not great soldiers, obviously. A lot of them do not know why am I laying my life down. So a lot of the times the Allies are able to kind of sweep the map with them. And then we say in May 1945, this is going to be the end, where the Soviet Union officially reaches Berlin first. There was a huge push between the three Allied powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, to reach Berlin first. Because the nation that reaches Berlin gets the glory of saying, we ended the war. In May 1945, the Soviet Union invades Berlin. Hitler, in an underground bunker, the Fuhrer bunker, knows that the war is officially lost, knows there is nothing we can do. His high command has either abandoned him, or killed themselves, and Hitler uh, but he kills himself rather than surrender. He knows that if the Soviet Union captures him alive, they will torture him and then eventually kill him, just like they did with Mussolini. Story for another day, though. And with the death of Hitler, the remnants of the German government very quickly surrender unconditionally to the Allied powers. So by the end of May 1945, the European theater of war is over. Hitler's few remaining soldiers take him and his new wife, Eva Braun, outside of the bunker, which is underground in Berlin, and they burn his body so that nobody can kind of torture it, can't be taken back. His body can't be taken back to the Soviet Union, put on display. And so we're not quite sure what happened to the skulls. The Soviet Union did claim, though, that they recovered the skull of Hitler, once again, unconfirmed. So we have here the Soviet Union flag, the hammer and sickle, flying over the capital of Berlin. And this is a German soldier in the fires of the remnants of the former capital of Germany. And with that, we have the end of the Western Front. Once again, so many stories are in here. And so we'll have lots of ways for you to expand and explore what's happening. But we still do have the Eastern Front, the European theater to talk about.